I'm excited to talk about automation because a lot of people will say they just don't have the time to do marketing, or they're inundated with a variety of tasks that they just they don't have the time, they don't have the staff. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to go from very simple, but we're also going to go to a little bit more complex and some of the tools that are out there and things that we're kind of hearing out in the cyber world right now. But today, we can kick it off in email automation. And I've, funny enough, I was working on a project a while back where it was a tedious task where somebody had to, every time somebody would sign up for this list, they would have to go in and send them this document, right? Not a good look, not a good feel, right? So what we sat down and we said, okay, they're signing up for this. It's the same exact document that needs to go out every single time. Correct. All right, great. So what we did was we set up a list, and once they decided to hit that list or to sign up for that list, we would set up an automation trigger, right? So you're going to hear us talk about triggers a lot. So it's, somebody goes into list A, and then it triggers something to then send out an email, right? So if you're using an email service provider, which are called ESPs, if you're using an email service provider, I know a lot of people use Constant Contact. There's a bunch of them out there, but let's say you're using Constant Contact. You take and you set up your list. Then the next is the trigger, right? So if somebody signs up for this list, list A, it'll set up the trigger. It'll say, now what do you want it to do? And you can literally build an email in there with your branding and the message that you want. And if it's a document that you want them to download or whatever, you can put a link in there, directly download to that document. So in this case, when we were talking about this, it literally was about, I would say, 500 to 750 times they had to do this per year. Now imagine taking 500 to 750 emails out of your life today, and that's just one single instance, right? That's what we're talking about in automation. There are other clients that I'm working with where I hear a lot of people doing anniversary, birthday kind of things, right? If somebody signs up and they select January as their birthday, they then go into that automation funnel of pushing out January birthday content, February birthday content, and so forth. So when we start to sit down and look at email automation, ask yourself, where am I getting caught up and what kind of triggers can I set up? And you're going to save tons and tons of time.
So let's back this up. You're talking 500 to 750 people signed up for your email over the year. Say you're a auto parts distributor.
Just in a year, right?
Yeah, you're an auto parts distributor with 3 locations, or you have laundromats, or you do catering, whatever it might be. All of the fundamentals are the same for your email marketing. So if somebody really doesn't have any email marketing, before we get into triggers, before we get in, how do they find someone to be their ESP?
For the email service provider?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's a variety of the smaller ones out there, right?
So, and they all kind of niche up. They're starting to niche up.
A little bit.
And that's the reason I'm putting that out there, is that, Constant Contact is this kind of massive thing. They try to simplify it for the really small ones. But then there's a few of these providers that are made just for the small business with 12 employees or 50 employees.
Right.
But you got to commit to one of them, right?
Yeah, you've got to find what works best for you, right? So I actually used to work for a company called Strong Mail, and we had it was a customized solution for email. Our programmers were the ones that were running the system, and it wasn't for small companies. I mean, our clients were, large company, Land's End, Castrol, you name it, right? So that's on a grand scale, but there's also very simple scales, right? Like it come back down to find where you need to be. I think from a small business perspective, something like MailChimp, Constant Contact, those typically, that's kind of where people fall. And they've made them so simple today that the templates that they provide allow you to just really be simple, right? So go in there, change some copy, add some imagery, maybe use a little bit of AI to add some imagery that you don't have, that kind of thing.
Different levels too, like, basically how many email addresses can you put in,
Right.
and you have to make that decision how much you're going to spend. Right. Typically, if you're small, you can get the like 5,000 email addresses and below, and that is pretty reasonable.
Right.
So breaking it down there, so you got your business and you say, all right, I want to go into this and I want to send some regular emails out. This is pretty low cost and I understand this. You're going to get your email signups from your website, right? Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Everyone should have that.
Sure.
If you want us to go through that, I guess we could, but you just basically put hey, would you like to be on our email newsletter? It has become fashionable to throw up what do you call that? The window that you have to X out of a lot of times.
Yep.
I'm not a huge fan of that,
Sure.
but you can do that.
Sure.
Or you could just put on your front page, hey, you want our email newsletter. And then they opt in, and then you've got their email right there. You probably already have existing customers that you can import those in there, and they're not going to report you for sending them a marketing email if they're already buying from you.
Right. They should opt in. But
yeah. Any other places you can look for those addresses?
Sure. I mean, anywhere you're having a communication with a potential customer, it could be social media, right? So I've got a few clients right now that are using Facebook forums, and they're collecting information there. So instead of sending somebody over to your website to then find your form and all those types of things, you can actually collect, the data there. So yeah, I mean, there's multiple areas, and just because you're signing up for an email newsletter or something like that, also look at it as what are some of the lead magnets that we can put out there, right? So what is something valuable you can put together that individuals, that they might want to use, or that it's a checklist of things that they need to focus on, right? So again, ask your customer what is the most important thing to them, and then try to give them some kind of deliverable that they can sign up for it.
So email automation, that is a place to start.
Right.
You want to, we're looking at things that can kind of go on and work in the background, and one of those is collecting email addresses, putting together using templates. We'll talk a little bit about AI because that's all we use now in sending and we even do it in our contracts, but we'll use that. What is a content bucket?
So content buckets are really, when you start talking about social and where you're heading, right? It's building up 4 to 5 kind of areas of what you're trying to share with your customer base, right? From an automation standpoint, you've got to kind of come up with it on your own, right? What's important to your customers, and stick within those variables, right? So if you're on Instagram or TikTok or any of those, right? Like it's literally, this is the kind of content that you want to push to them, right? Maybe it's how-tos, maybe it's, inspirational things that you're doing, those types of things. But the nice part about that is you can actually go, you talk about using AI, right? So we can go to AI and we can start to ask AI, in these content buckets, provide me with 30 ideas on how to do XYZ. And it'll come back, and you can start to pick and choose what you think is valuable. And then once you get all of that together, the biggest thing that people fail to realize is you put all of this content together in these 4 or 5 different areas, but then they sit there and they go, now I've got to post it every day. Right? And the funny part about that is there are scheduling tools out there. So you can literally, if you can come up with all of your content for the next month or the next quarter or even the next year, if you're really, you got the energy to do it, you can schedule all of that and walk away from it and only come back when somebody comments and you need to interact. And we can set up, different triggers on that as well. But, from a simple side, we're still kind of in the simple phase here. Schedule things, right? Develop your content. Use AI to get ideas. Everyone's on ChatGPT, let's face it, or some form of it. Use that and kind of figure out the content that you want to put out there, but then use some other tools to build that out and then schedule it, because scheduling something for 30 days and walking away from it is terrific, right? you don't want to have to go into Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all of them every single day and post content. Just set it and forget it.
So email marketing obviously is one that can be automated fairly easily in any of the programs that you do it. Certainly your social media scheduling. You don't realize that some of these programs that you kind of started out in one area, like Canva, was mostly just to design some real quick things. But once you design that, then they found, well, what do we do with it, right? Well, then Canva will actually schedule that for you to post.
Right.
And you'll go right, it's one-stop shop right there.
Right. It's funny. I haven't used Canva a lot because I've always been an Adobe Creative Suite guy, but I'm toying with both of them at this point. So the YouTube thumbnail for this episode was actually, there's a robot in the picture. It was generated from Canva. So it was their AI assistant in there, typed up, I need a robot doing this, and that's where it came from. So if you're listening to this or you go to YouTube and you see, we're using the technology here that we're promoting.
So that's for your posts. You're
Right.
going to Instagram, you're going to X, you're going to Facebook, TikTok, whatever you choose. And we've gone through the social media. In the beginning, especially if you're newer, choose one.
Right.
And then, if you're a little longer in the tooth, then you may be on all of them. But you also can buy some ads regularly just for small amounts.
Right.
And you're like, oh, well, I think I'm just going to go in there and learn how to buy ads on Instagram. And then you go in there and you use their interface. And then you do it once. Well, if it's just kind of a small amount and you already did it once and it worked, you can now automate that also.
Right. There's so much automation in social ads at this point. Just from an agency perspective, I'm going to tell you exactly what happens, right? So you sit down with a client, you start to have conversations, and you want to understand what's the message they want to promote. We many times will go into ChatGPT and say, here, write 30 ideas for an ad that's going to run on Facebook and Instagram. Then we start to tweak. Then we start to look at it, right? And we're like, all right, I like this piece. I'm starting to put this together. I see where they went with this. Maybe I'll pull that in. And you really start to build the text of the ad at that point. When you get into the platform, when you're in Ads Manager in Meta, it will actually start to offer suggestions, right? So you upload an image in there, and it will do image enhancements. It will add music if you want to add music to it because it says that it improves the response. They will have text suggestions. It'll take what you've written and it'll provide you with 5, 6, 7 other alternatives, and you can select those as well. So even though you have a plan and where you're going inside social and you're building these ads, there are additional suggestions that are coming up through AI that they're using. And what we're saying is use those because they're providing that as an example, right? The advertising platforms that we're using today are being modified, really, to help us get more response. So instead of having to sit down with somebody that is clearly like this massive expert, what they're doing is they're bringing it back to you and saying, our system is learning based on what's happening, and if you allow us, we're going to take your ad here. You have to allow it, but we're providing those suggestions. So let's, the days of old where we were like, no, we don't want to use this, we don't want to use that. Many times, those suggestions that they're giving you are outperforming what you were originally doing in the first place.
Email automation, social media scheduling, your posts, and then your social ads. I know it kind of gets a little bit overwhelming, and that's kind of why we go through this over and over, and we're doing it, and eventually it'll be a little bit more, structured through the Matt Hansen thing that you will be able to find. But ultimately, you mentioned the word performance, and you have to be able to measure all of this. Right. What does Performance Max mean?
Well, Performance Max is more on the Google side, right? So maybe Jim, have you ever ran a Google campaign, so paid search campaign or anything like that?
You want to know that I ran it several times in your classes.
Okay.
And that was the last time I did it because we are overwhelmed here as a digital sports streaming thing. But we're finishing up basketball, and that is one of the things that we talked about is like, sometimes people can't find the games. We need to get some Google search words for this area. So you're going to tell me how to do that and why to do that.
So here, I'm going to make it very simple for you, right? So we're talking about automating. When you start a Google paid search campaign, you have to go in there and you have to put in all of the content and all that, and that's perfectly fine. But you have to continually monitor, right? It's not learning necessarily. It's the keywords you put in there. It's the ads you put in there. You have to watch it. You really have to understand what's working and what's not. Google has this other side, and it's called Performance Max. And it really is, you upload all of these assets. It can be images, it can be text, it can be, all this different stuff. I don't want to get into the details because we only have, like I said, 25 minutes in these podcasts. But Performance Max is literally you upload all of these assets, and Google's AI backend is literally going out there to find those people that are going to click on your stuff. And it works for you. So, I've actually worked with people at Google that say, just do PMAX. Like it's legit. Set it up, let it run, and let it go. And compare it to what you're doing. And odds are you're going to see it's definitely doing as well as you are, if not better. So if you're looking out there and you're saying, well, I don't have the time or effort, go set up a PMAX campaign because quite honestly, it'll take you probably 30 minutes, maybe an hour if you're not well versed in what it is, but go set it up and let it just learn and run and set that budget to what you want to do and just, again, I'm done. I don't have to do any more. Just let it learn.
All right, let's hit that part. Set that budget. 3 laundromats in the same little area. $100, $200. What are you talking?
I always say if you're spending $1, you're doing well.
There you go. You see what he's saying? And I know since I've taken his classes, you got to be in the game to learn that. If you go in and you buy a $20 campaign, you've still had to fill out everything, and you still have to learn all of that process. And then all of a sudden you may be doing 200, or if you got 5 banks or 7 banks, then all of a sudden you're doing 2,000. You know what I mean? But that's his philosophy. You got to be in that game.
I've spent $5 a day for clients, and I've spent $10,000 a day for clients, right? Funny part is the results are the same. It's a numbers game. So that's all it comes down to is how many people are going to see your ad and how many people are going to click over. Doesn't matter if you're spending 5 or you're spending 10 grand a day. I mean, it really is just a numbers game. How many people do you want to see your ad?
So let's keep it moving here. We got to automate. We got a website. We all have a website, right? You want to put in pop up. I mean, somehow it became okay to just get really sticky and pop up coupons and offers and that kind of thing. But you know what? People aren't that turned off by it. Perhaps you need to look at it. How would you automate that process?
So I will take you back to an e-commerce website that I had for our local shop. We had built this website, and it was a collector-based product. For years, I kept asking, how many pieces are in this collectible? And it turned out there was 242, if I remember correctly. I developed an entire list of this, and I put it up on the website. It was a number 2 page on the website. And then it dawned on me. I'm like, what am I doing this for? This is dumb. I said, why don't we build this as a PDF that they can then take with them? And we'll gather an email address. And our email list went from a couple hundred to thousands after that, right? So we literally looked at what is the one thing that people were wanting, that lead magnet, and we provided it to them. And we generated so much business off of that email list just because we were giving away one simple PDF. And that was just a pop-up on the website. It was just saying, hey, if you want to see every single piece, here's a checklist of every single piece that's been ever produced. Just name and email. That thing produced like crazy.
What is Zapier?
So as we were talking, we're going to get a little bit more detailed or a little bit more technical. Zapier is basically allows you to make connections. And what I mean by that is, and I brought a couple examples today. Imagine somebody signs up for your email list and then it goes into a Google Sheet, right? That Google Sheet can then be tied to something else. So Zapier will say, okay, whenever something populates into that Google Sheet, it will look at that and it will then do something else that you've told it to do. So there's a company called Handwritten, and instead of I, it's Y, right? And it's handwritten. Basically, they do notes. So think of it in terms of somebody just signs up for your company, right? You get them on your list, you go out and you meet with them, and then you go back to your database and you check a button, right, in that contact. Now, what you're telling Zapier is that when that button is clicked, right, yes, I met with them. Okay, great. That button has been clicked. We will now send a message over to Handwritten. Handwritten will write a note that you've already customized. It will pull their name and any other details that you've put in there, and it will mail it out to them. So think of it in terms of all you have to do is go in there and select a button on your database, and it automatically triggers a thank you note that went out to them in almost a personalized message.
What about surveys in that?
Surveys are great, right? So, if same thing, you meet with somebody, or maybe somebody, you finished a job with somebody. Let's say you're an HVAC company and you just, it's been cold here. We've had, it's like 8 degrees, right? You put them into the system. They're in your database at this point, right? Trigger a survey to come back to them. Trigger even a Google review to go back to them, right? You can do that with Zapier. So it's, here's a new customer, here's what we did with them. As soon as that goes into that database, it should trigger through Zapier over to either SurveyMonkey or something like that, or even Google reviews. Just an ability to kind of connect that. So you automate it a little bit easier.
So you've automated all this. We talked email automation, social posts, ads. Of course, you can do it on your own website, and then basically have a management system with Zapier that'll be able to say if X happens, then do Y. If Y happens, then do Z. That kind of thing. Final topic: where does AI fit in all of this?
It's part of all of it, right? So I think when people think of AI, they think ChatGPT. That's all they think about, right? AI has been part of so many things for 20, 30 years that you just don't even realize that it's happening. But everyone thinks it's just ChatGPT. So everything that we've talked about today is literally kind of AI based, right? So it's something happens, you train it to do something, and then it goes from there. There are a variety of new things that are popping out every single day, right? So one of the ones that I was talking about this week was Lindy.ai. And Lindy.ai, if you are in any kind of sales or you do a lot of meetings, one of the things that I heard with Lindy the other day is whenever you can tie it to your Google Calendar, and when it notices that you have a meeting coming up in 30 minutes, in an hour, it will go in and look who's part of that meeting, and you can train it and say, well, go to LinkedIn and tell me who these people are. Give me the breakdown. What's their name? What company they work for? What's their title? It'll go back into, you can set it for like 30 days to go back in your email and look up all the topics that were discussed. And really what you do is you train it to develop a one-page sheet that's emailed to you 30 minutes before the meeting, which is a summary of what you're going into. Right? So I've talked with a couple people this week where they're just like, I get into these meetings and I don't remember what we're talking about. This is literally AI being trained. We call them, they're basically called AI agents at this point. They work for you. And it creates this document that when you're going into this meeting, you know exactly what's happening, right? You know all the bullet points of what we're going to discuss, the full background, what's been discussed over the last 30 days. And that's where things are heading now. So people are using things like Lindy where they're developing these agents. They're developing marketing agents and accounting agents and financial model agents. Like they're doing all these different things. And it's very similar to like Zapier where you can tell it do this. But like when you get into things like Lindy, you're training it based on your writing style, what you want. Like if I get an email from somebody in my business, I can train it to come back. So let's say you send me an email and it says, hey, I'd love to meet with you next week. What do you have available? I can literally train it to write you back in my voice and say, here are the dates and times that I have, because it will go back to my calendar and send it, right? So then you come back and say, I'd love to have, next Tuesday at 6 o'clock, right? Okay, it will schedule it for me. I don't even have to touch it. Basically, next week, I look at my calendar on Tuesday and I see, okay, I have a meeting with you at 6 o'clock. 30 minutes before that meeting, now it's telling me exactly what we're talking about.
He is Matt Hansen, and I'm sure he is striking fear in some of us people in, Matt, the name of the podcast, if you're watching, is right behind us, Mastering Local Marketing. And if you're in that game, some of this stuff is going to be new, some of it's going to be daunting, but all of it is effective. And it just, for him to talk about Lindy.ai, I'm familiar with it. Automate your CRM, automate your customer support, automate your data, analytics, all that stuff. Lindy AI can take you into that. And that would take a learning curve to get into. And that might be someone that you would give it to your CM, your chief marketing officer or whatever. So don't be overwhelmed by that is what I'm trying to tell people.
Yeah, well, I've got one more I want to throw in there.
I know, and
right?
if it's going to overwhelm people, don't do it.
It's not. So what I want you to do is go out there and look at, it's Replit, Replit. And basically, it is a new AI agent out there that is building websites and mobile applications by literally you're just putting in there what you want it to do. So think of it in terms, we were talking about scheduling meetings. I can go in there, and one of their examples that they give on their website is, I want to create a website where somebody can go in and schedule a meeting with me and have options. It will literally start to ask you questions. Well, what are the times? What are the days? When are you available? What do you want it to look like? And it will create an ability, a website for people to go. You can just send them the link, and then they can go in and actually click on it and start to schedule, because it's then tied back to your Google Calendar or whatever kind of calendar system you're using. But we can build mobile applications in a day at this point, right? And they've just recently launched, you can actually upload those applications to iOS and all of, so this is a complete game changer. Those of you that have always said, I want to create an app, I want to create a website, but I don't have the knowledge, the expertise, these websites now are literally building it for you with you just telling them what you want it to do.
Replit, I'm well aware of this. I have a son-in-law that's in the data analytics and into coding. So I'm following this too. Mm-hmm. And his whole shift was, I just went to Georgia Tech and got a coding degree. And he's like, he's a little worried about people that just have that coding skill, because you could basically just tell, even ChatGPT will do it. And but Replit is much more defined, and there are more and more of Replits out there that will write the code for you, and then all of a sudden you have an app or a portion or some sort of application onto your website that will do that dream business. I think that's part of their marketing is we'll make your dream business app in a day, and
it's crazy.
It's pretty cheap. All right, so you did freak everybody out. You did. I was like, don't freak everybody out.
No, but I think what we have to realize is it doesn't matter that we don't have to be a multi-billion-dollar company anymore, right? You could be somebody that's sitting at home at your kitchen table and say, you know what, I've got this idea for an app or a website, and literally put it into these systems, and you can have it built, right? So technology is getting, I say fun, you say scary, right? But imagine just changing the amount of time and effort that you have to put into something and just doing it very simply by putting in some prompts, and it spits it out on the other side, right? Like we go back, I know some of the people listening may not understand or remember or even have watched, but the Jetsons, right? Like they would put in their dinner order into a machine and it would spit it out, right? Like I'm still waiting for that. But that's essentially what we're doing with this stuff is you're putting in my order, this is what I want to see come out, and it's coming out, and it's use it, right? It's not just garbage anymore. So where we are today and where we're going to be in 2 years are going to be completely different, and I can't wait to see where some of this stuff goes. But just realize that there are tools out there. So if you don't have big budgets to hire things, just realize there's stuff out there that you can start to play around with.
Adriana Alvarez, a student at Purdue Northwest, is our producer. Thank you, Adriana. We appreciate it, like always. And meet George Jetson, Jane, his wife, their dog, Elroy. Hey, this has been Mastering Local Marketing. We talked a lot about automating your marketing, so don't be freaked. Listen to it again. All this stuff that he's talking about in 2025, by the time you listen in 2028, none of it's going to apply because it's all going to have changed.
Just moving quick.
He's Matt Hansen. I'm Jed. And until next time, we will see you later.